Hello and welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, listen, I want to talk to you about the Biden's border crisis, if you will. I'm not sure that we can turn this thing around, but I'm hopeful that we can. I'm hopeful that President Trump will win in November. I'm hopeful that there will be some element of mass deportation, but I'm concerned about illegal immigration and what is doing to our country right now. I'm joined by our guest, Mark Krikorian. He's with the Center for Immigration Studies, and this is a man in an institution that does, such great work and research when it comes to this border issue. I felt like he was the perfect person, obviously, to bring on to talk about this. So, Mark, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. We appreciate you joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, Mark. So let me just start with a couple of headlines right off the bat that hit this week. And I want to get your take on it. But one, ICE arrests 8 illegal immigrants with ISIS ties. And I got to tell you, I look beyond that headline. And all I can think, Mark, is, okay, those are the ones that we know about. What about the getaways? What's your take on this issue, this topic?
In this particular case, it was a real scary issue because these are 8 people who are Tajiks. A lot of your listeners may not even know what that is, but that's an ethnic group from Central Asia, that former Soviet Union. And they all came across the southern border. Most of them, it seems, the information's incomplete. Most of them, it seems, came over, turned themselves into the Border Patrol, and were let go. At least one of them used this thing called the CBP-1 mobile phone app to schedule his illegal immigration into the United States. And he was also let go. These people were supposedly fully vetted. The problem is, there's 2 problems here, or at least let me put it this way. This highlights 2 problems. One is, you can't vet people if you don't have information on who they are. What are we going to do? Call up the Tajikistan DMV and have them tell us who these people are? Even if they knew, they wouldn't tell us. And the other problem is, under this administration, they are ignoring the mandate in the immigration law that anybody who comes over the border and says, I'm persecuted, I want asylum, what have you, they have to be detained. They have to be kept in detention the whole time until there's some decision made, one way or the other, to either let them into the country or boot them back out. This administration is just letting people go in hours or maybe a couple of days. And the fact is, they let these guys go, and only later did the FBI said, hey, fellas, these guys have ties to one of these ISIS groups. And so ICE then scrambled and went to find them. And luckily they did. But like you said, this is just this one group of 8 guys. How many other people have they let go? And on top of that, how many other people has the Border Patrol not been able to catch because it's playing nursemaid to illegal immigrants, and it's sort of been turned into Walmart greeters at the border by this administration. And so they're just not able to patrol the border as much as they should be.
You know what, Mark? I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually have a video clip that I want to get your response to. Before we get to that, I do want to mention that this show is brought to you in part by MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell at MyPillow.com has a fabulous deal right now, $25 extravaganza, and Lord knows you're going to need some good sleep because I think Mark Krikorian is probably going to give you a few nightmares as we continue through this interview. So make sure you take advantage of the $25 extravaganza. They've got deals, from the dish towels to regular bath towels to the MyPillow sandals to the MyPillow with the Giza fabric, all $25. All you have to do is go to MyPillow.com, click on that radio podcast square, enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or give them a call at 800-858-0263. I'm going back to my guest, Mark Krikorian. He's with the Center for Immigration Studies. Mark, before the ad read here, you were talking to us about the border and how these Border Patrol agents essentially have become babysitters, if you will, and then they just have to let people go. I can't imagine what the morale is on the border, but I want to play a video clip for you of a Border Patrol agent saying just that to a CNN reporter, and I want to get your take on it. Let's go ahead and roll it, por favor, Gabe.
What do you think this executive order, is that going to do anything?
Well, it only took him, 3 years and 7 months?
In a rare encounter, we meet a Border Patrol agent eager to vent. He asks us to mask his identity, worried he'll be fired for talking so openly.
Well, his job to do, take time, secure the border. We didn't have to babysit.
Does it frustrate you when you hear that, when you hear the narrative, like, why aren't Border Patrol doing anything? And
Our hands are tied. If I don't allow them to cross and they call and complain, now I'm in trouble and I'm going to lose my job.
He blames the current administration.
All right, so that's a Border Patrol agent telling CNN, of all people. I'm surprised CNN is even reporting about this now, Mark. But I mean, basically confirming exactly what you just said.
Absolutely. I mean, I recently did an episode of my own podcast, Parsing Immigration Policy, available in all good podcast platforms, on the 100th anniversary of the Border Patrol, which was just recently. And we had two former chiefs of the Border Patrol, and they said guys are retiring right and left or getting new jobs, in other law enforcement, because this is not what they signed up for. They did not sign up to be Walmart greeters at the U.S. border. And the morale is down, and those new agents who are coming in are learning a different kind of job than what they should learn. So
that's a great point. That is a great point.
So even if this administration goes away next year, they're going to have to sort of re-educate the new guys and say, look, fellas, this is not what the Border Patrol is supposed to be doing. And this is your job, is to stop people from coming into the country, not manage illegal immigration, which is what this administration is making them do.
Mark, I got to tell you, I've talked about this subject ad nauseum, and I've never even considered that. Such a simple and just a factual truth. It makes total sense, obviously, but just something that we don't typically consider. Over the weekend, Mark, right in front of the White House, the media is trying to whitewash this. We have just over 3 minutes left in this block, but the media is trying to whitewash this. But basically, you had pro-Hamas protesters right in front of the White House. I don't know how many of them are foreign nationals. I don't know how many are Americans, but I'm concerned that, the EU, they got their butts kicked over the weekend, and they voted, conservative and conservative in Europe and in a lot of places. And that was great news. But it's like, this is something that's been happening a long time in Europe. But it seems to me like we're watching Europe erode, and then we're just letting people into our country that absolutely hate it. I'm concerned that the problem isn't just with these ISIS illegals, but that we've got a lot of people that fundamentally hate America, fundamentally think that we're the great Satan, and they want to take us down. And Mark, they're already here. And frankly, I'm not sure there's anything we can do about it.
Well, I mean, first of all, you're right that a lot of these people are Americans. I mean, we've got a problem just with an element of our own people. But there's no question that we should not be letting in people who hate America. And we need to make this a more central and be more aggressive about it, and basically do what is called ideological exclusion. In other words, it's not just keeping terrorists out. Obviously, I mean, heck, even the Biden administration thinks that would be a good thing, although they're not really willing to do what it takes. We need to also keep out people who support that kind of worldview, even if they themselves would never strap on a suicide vest.
I like that.
You can never do that perfectly. People are going to lie, all that stuff, but we can be a lot better at it. We've done a lot of writing on this, where you basically say, look, if you believe that, if you're not in favor of the free exercise of religion and people can have any religion or no religion or what have you, if you're not for that, we X your name out. You don't get to come into the United States, because the First Amendment doesn't apply to foreigners abroad. We get to pick who comes here. And if people are fundamentally reject the basic lowest common denominator principles of our country, I don't care if they have relatives here or anything else, we cannot be letting those people in. And if they're temporary visitors, like foreign students or anything, we need to bounce them out.
Mark, listen, I love that idea, ideological exclusion. This is the first time that I'm hearing that. We have just about 50 seconds before the break. What about the people? What about the people that are in Congress that believe the same way as some of these people? Is there any way they could be a part of this? No. In all seriousness, do you think that there's the stomach for that in Washington, D.C.? 30 seconds.
Not now, but there might be starting January 20th. And of course, it's not just the administration. It's something Congress needs to support. I'm afraid that it's going to take some kind of disaster before people develop the stomach, and then it'll quickly pass. So you need to act quickly when something like that happens to fix new policies in place.
All right. I'm speaking to Mark Krikorian with the Center for Immigration Studies. This is the Carl Jackson Show with the Salem Podcast Network and Salem TV. We'll be right back after the break. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. And again, I'm joined by my guest, Mark Krikorian of the Center for Immigration Studies. Before I get back to my guest, I want to talk to you about wealth protection research. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we hold sacred, and that is free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom that we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where wealth protection research steps in. They're armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They are defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silence. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election, and it contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it free. All you have to do is text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act now. Text the word IDEAS to 76626. And if you text IDEAS, the word IDEAS today, you'll also get a free gold investment kit from Wealth Protection Research, sponsored by Augusta Precious Metals. Okay, now I want to get back to my guest. Again, we're speaking to Mark Krikorian of the Center for Immigration Studies. Okay, Mark, listen, let me get your take on this. So Biden signed an executive order, and apparently he wants to stem the flow of the border crisis that he caused. Does his executive order do that?
No, it doesn't. It's a political stunt. We actually looked at the details of it beyond the press release that the White House puts out. And even the White House press release level of analysis is terrible, because what they're saying is that they will take some extraordinary steps only if the number of illegal aliens coming between the legal ports of entry, in other words, sneaking across the border, only if it goes over 2,500 a day, 2,500 a day. Now, the thing to remember here is that Obama's own DHS secretary, named Jay Johnson, he's a Democrat, but he's a serious guy. He said 1,000 a day overwhelms the system. These guys are talking about normalizing 2,500 a day, and only then will they actually do something. And as you can imagine, there's all kinds of exceptions that they're people they're going to let through. They're going to keep letting people through the legal ports of entry if they schedule their illegal immigration with this app that they used. It's fake. It almost certainly has reduced numbers a little bit, and it will for a little longer, just because smugglers and prospective illegal aliens, when there's a new policy, always sort of pull back and say, okay, well, let's see how this is going to go. Because it's so phony, you're going to see the numbers going back up in relatively short order.
I mean, this is absolutely just appalling to me. On a more personal level, for the average American out there, maybe they have not been impacted by illegal immigration, or at least they don't know that they've been impacted by illegal immigration. But I remember reading, I believe, a column of yours quite some time ago, Mark, and I got to tell you, as I've sat in for Dennis Prager, the Officer Tatum, Mike Gallagher, I've used it over and over and over again to touch on some of the issues that are going to touch everyday Americans. Simple issues like let's take healthcare, for example. I don't think Americans, especially middle class Americans, that may not be may not be feeling the full impact of illegal immigration understand completely what it'll mean to their everyday life. Can you touch on how it'll impact everyday Americans, starting with healthcare?
Sure. I mean, the most obvious area you see the effect of immigration and healthcare is in emergency care, emergency rooms. And because if you're a relatively less educated person, even if you're legal, you're working in a job that doesn't pay a lot of money. And you're probably not even earning enough to feed your own children. So you're going to be using welfare. And even if you're not, if you're illegal, often you'll just go to an emergency room, because under federal law, anyone who walks into an emergency room has to receive at least basic stabilizing treatment. And I actually think that's a good idea. I want to live in a society where we don't let people die on the steps of the emergency room just because they can't pay.
Sure.
But you cannot maintain that kind of rule if you're letting in, under Biden, 2 million newcomers from abroad, disproportionately poor, who are going to make use of these facilities. So about your point about, maybe not everybody has been affected, the fact is every town is a border town now. Every state is a border state. And they're seeing that in New York and Chicago real clearly, but it's true everywhere around the country.
There's another video clip that I'd like to play for you, Gabe. If we could go to video clip number 4, Biden pushes federal agencies to register voters. And one of my concerns, Mark, is that listen, I don't think there's any secret, to this anymore. I really do believe that what the Biden administration is doing is, I don't think there's replacement theory anymore. I think it's basically replacement fact. I think the Biden administration wants a permanent underclass. They tell their voters to go ahead, women to go ahead and kill their babies. Families, we don't have traditional families at the same levels that we used to. They scare their voters into man-made climate change, so women are scared to have children and bring children into the world. I think the Democrat Party has to reproduce themselves. Maybe I'm a little wacky, I guess, in the way that I'm explaining it, but they need these voters. They want these voters because they want a permanent underclass. Mark, am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I just think that's not the first. That's not the first thing that's on their minds. In other words, They're doing this on immigration, not because they're going to be importing a lot of voters. It will help at some point marginally, but that's a long run issue. I think the reason this administration is doing this is because the people running immigration do not believe the American people have the right to keep anybody out. This is an ideological thing. Wow. If it were pure political cynicism, I actually would prefer that, because it would be easier to battle against. You know what I mean? Whereas these guys, they think that borders are immoral in themselves, and America's borders especially, that it's basically Jim Crow, or in Spanish, Jaimito Cuervo, that the United States simply has no right. And if the law requires them to enforce borders, they're going to subvert it, and they see themselves as heroic in subverting immigration law, because the people running immigration in this administration come from these activist, NGOs. That's their worldview. And that's not going to change unless they're simply removed from those positions.
Mark, I got to tell you, just to be frank, that answer is more terrifying to me.
I agree. I think so.
Wow. Okay.
You're going to need that pillow. You're going to need that pillow, Carl.
I am going to need that pillow. MyPillow.com, promo code Carl. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let me play another video clip for you, if we could. Again, we're speaking to Mark Krikorian for the Center for Immigration Studies. Biden pushes federal agencies to register voters. And you just heard Mark say that this is, with a lot of these guys, this is ideological, which is frankly scarier to me, and I'd imagine to you as well. But let's go ahead and roll the video and get Mark's response. Okay, all right. So we'll have to save that for another time. Then I'm sorry, I'm just time wise. Okay, Mark. So let me ask you this: what is education, culture, and assimilation, middle-class jobs, all of these things are going to be impacted by illegal immigration. Talk to us about that, and what do we need to do to stem the tide? We have about a minute and a half.
Well, the short answer to the first part of your question is that all of those concerns, jobs, immigration, security, welfare, they're all the same thing. In a modern society, things have changed from what they were like 100 or 200 years ago. We have a post-industrial knowledge-based economy. We have a welfare state. The world is smaller. All of those things make high levels of immigration much more difficult to deal with than they were a century or 2 centuries ago. In other words, it's not really the immigrants that are that different. They're not. They're just regular working stiffs. Some are good, some are bad. Most are a little bit of each, just like everybody else. It's that the situation they're coming into, in good ways and bad ways, has changed. Now, what we can do about it, as far as enforcing immigration law, Donald Trump figured it out. It wasn't that hard. Now, it wasn't perfect. There was a lot still to do, but we know how to do this. And what I fear is that a lot of patriotic, ordinary people are going to say, there's nothing we can do. We need to get out our rifles and stop this ourselves. That's not the answer. The answer is let the law enforcement people enforce the law. That video you showed tells us that they're not allowed to do their jobs. When they're allowed to do their jobs, we can fix the illegal immigration part of this it's not that hard.
Okay, Mark Krikorian, Center for Immigration Studies. Listen, Mark, I have to let you go, but I'd like to keep you another segment. I know this is late notice. Can you stay or do you need to go?
No, I'm happy to stay.
Okay, we'll have Mark Krikorian for one more segment. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Mark Krikorian of the Center for Immigration Studies was kind enough to stay with us for a little longer because, honestly, his information was jaw-dropping, and I wanted to hear more because I want you to hear more, frankly. I want Americans to understand what's happening at the border. I think the border crisis is even worse than we think, and I'm not just talking about numbers. Mark Krikorian revealed that a lot of these people are ideological in their belief system where they just believe we shouldn't even have borders. I mean, this is absolutely insane. I mean, to me, that's absolutely terrifying. But I want to play this video. We wanted to play it the last segment. We'll play it now. The Biden administration is pushing federal agencies to register voters. There's no doubt. Listen, the Democrat Party, they have a system. This doesn't just include illegal aliens, obviously. But there's no doubt they're going to try to register illegal aliens, and they're trying now. So anyway, let's play the video, and let's get Mark's reaction. Por favor, Gabe.
I now recognize Representative Crane from the great state of Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitson, in your opinion, sir, why is the SBA involved itself in election process and registering voters in swing states?
Thank you for that question. So this is part of the executive order. It commanded every single federal agency to take part in this whole of government, get out the vote effort to benefit the Biden administration. And so SBA is one of those tools. And so Michigan, as we mentioned, it's well-known fact that it's a key battleground state. And so it doesn't require a lot of votes to make a significant impact. And
Right.
so that's
right.
what it appears.
What does the SBA stand for, Mr. Whitson? Do you know?
It's the Small Business Administration.
Do you find that odd that the Small Business Administration is involved in getting out the vote in a state that President Biden is down in and absolutely needs to win to stay president?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You said that there's other government agencies doing this as well, Mr. Whitson. Can you go over those real quick?
Yes, so again, that's the Health and Human Services has transformed more than 1,400 federally qualified health centers located in states across the country into voter registration hubs. You got the Department of Labor has turned more than 2,300 American job centers, again, scattered across the country into voter registration hubs. USDA, Department of Education is allowing federal work-study funds to go to college students to become an army of workers for left-wing groups engaging in voter registration.
I think we can cut the video, Gabe. I think we get the gist of it. But Mark, your reaction to this? You have all of these bureaucracies that have a get out the vote campaign. Have you seen a tie to illegal immigration with the get out the vote campaign from the Biden administration using these bureaucracies?
The way I look at this is that there are no doubt some non-citizens, legal and illegal, who end up registering, but registering to vote, they're in a sense kind of duped into it by this kind of policy by the government. Because look, Most immigrants aren't PhDs. They're regular people, and they're strangers here. And so they go to the DMV or maybe the Small Business Administration or any of these other agencies, and a government official gives them a piece of paper to register to vote. It's supposed to be on them to check that they're non-citizens and not register. Well, how do they know? I mean, do you ever read the fine print when you download some new app or something? No, of course not. So there are bad actors. There's no question about it sometimes. But the bad actors mainly here are our own government basically luring people into breaking federal law and creating problems in the future. In the meantime, though, they're kind of hoping they'll sign up. And if it's, 100 extra votes in a really tight race, it could matter.
Oh, man. Let me ask you this, Mark, just a simple question. Is the immigration problem, I mean, beyond the numbers, is it worse, in your opinion, than most Americans comprehend? Are there issues that we aren't considering that we should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worse than most people imagine, but the reason it's worse is because of the numbers. In other words, if you had 2 Somali families move to Minnesota, and that was it, well, they'd become Viking fans pretty soon because there's just 2 of them in a huge sea of Americans. You take in 20,000 Somali families into Minneapolis, that starts to change the calculus. This is all about numbers. And what I think people don't get is, and we actually did a report on this recently at CIS.org, we are now at the highest percentage of immigrants in our population in American history. It's already higher than it was during the Ellis Island era 150 years ago. And there's no sign of it slowing down.
Wait, let me clarify. Are you talking about just in the last few years?
Yeah, we've blown past the record, basically. Literally just, I think it was last year or earlier this year is when we actually exceeded the highest percentage in American history. And the Census Bureau, before this administration took over, projected when would we reach the level we're at now, which is like almost 16%. They projected it would happen in 2039. It happened 15 years sooner because this administration has basically put out an invitation around the world to illegally immigrate to the United States. So the numbers are the key. If you bring the numbers down, all of the other issues become less serious.
And then President Trump, obviously, while he was in office, the first couple of years were a little rough, but he managed to get the border under control the last couple of years with the Remain in Mexico City policy. If President Trump is to be elected, and let's hope, wishful thinking, that he'll have the House and the Senate as well, what should he do day one to end this crisis, so to speak, or at least curtail it initially?
The first thing you got to do is stop letting people go. The reason they keep coming is because they know they're going to be let go. What that means is you're going to have to use Defense Department resources and set up detention centers on the border. Right away, nobody gets let go, period. Then that costs a lot of money for a month or two. And once the message gets out that the party is over, you're going to see the flow significantly abate. Now, there's a lot more to it, but that's the day one thing you have to do. There's other policy changes. We actually have been working with the Heritage Foundation, which is leading a coalition of groups, about what the agenda should be on a bunch of issues. We're the ones running the immigration part of it. And so we've actually got written the text of executive orders and what have you ready to go. But the first thing has to be nobody gets let go. And then there's all kinds of other things that have to stem from that.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left here. I'm speaking to Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies. Mark, do you want to go ahead and share your podcast as well with the viewers so they can check that out?
We're online at CIS.org, our whole website, and we have a podcast called Parsing Immigration Policy every week. It's on the usual podcast places, or it's also on our website. And if you have a taste for snark and sarcasm, I'm on Twitter at Mark S, as in Stephen, Mark S. Krikorian. And I still call it Twitter. It could be spelled X, but it's pronounced Twitter.
Oh, man, that is so true. I may as well just cave myself on that, Mark. I hate calling it X. All right, so Mark S. Krikorian on Twitter. Check him out, CIS.org. And what is it again? Parsing what?
Parsing immigration policy.
Okay, parsing immigration policies. Okay, Mark, let me ask you, 2 minutes left. With the sheer number of illegal aliens that have come into the country, no assimilation, through Biden's border crisis, I suspect many more will come before Biden is out of office, by the grace of God, November, and then gone in January. What type of damage do these numbers do to a nation like America? Culture, assimilation. I mean, these people aren't assimilating into the culture whatsoever. What type of damage, long-term damage, will that do to this nation?
There's a lot of damage in a country. In other words, it's nothing's ever over, but the cost is quite significant, and dollar cost and otherwise. And the second thing the new administration would have to do after stopping the new inflow is getting as many of the new illegal aliens that Biden has let in out of the country, because that's got to be job one. Illegal immigrants who've been here for 20 years, they're still illegal. Let's put that issue aside. The ones that Biden let in cannot be allowed to stay. And we can remove those people, but it's cost us a lot up to now. Like in New York, they're cutting back on services for people in New York City for Americans because of all the costs. And it's going to cost money to push them out,
right.
But this can't be a ratchet where the Democrats let in lots of people and then the Republicans shrug their shoulders and say, okay, well, we'll let them all stay. That can't be allowed to happen.
Guys, I mean, illegal immigration is going to impact the healthcare system, the educational system, where we didn't even get to, where literally kids are going to have to compete for the teachers' time. Teachers are overwhelmed. Middle class jobs. I mean, you're going to be competing with jobs against illegals. Rent prices are up in many cities because of illegal immigration crime. Obviously, Mark Krikorian writes about all of this stuff beautifully at the Center for Immigration Studies. Make sure that you check him out. And also Mark S. Krikorian on Twitter. Mark, God bless you, man. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks.
All right. We'll be back, guys. Carl Jackson Show.